A very good morning to you. Wednesday is here with us again, and if it's Wednesday ni siku ya clinic ya mfuko. My bench is outside, it's sanitized, and we are good to go for our financial clinic for today. I don't think there's ever a time in history where it is so easy to get a loan as today. In fact, before we started the show, I was busy on my phone checking my loan limit on the various platforms that are available. What's my loan limit? And I was consolidating and I was thinking if I was to take a loan from all these platforms, I could have a good amount of money in my account this morning. Borrowing has never been easy like it is today. And you know what? Sometimes because it is so easily available, we end up making lots and lots of mistakes. I'm sure you've experienced this where somebody tells you, "Situme kwa your number." Don't send that money to me on my number. Send it on this number. Why? Niko na fuliza, or I have got this, or I have got this. Taking a loan has become so easy that we are just all over the place. Taking from John to pay Mary, and then taking from Mary to pay Janet, and then taking Janet to pay Tom. It's just one big confusion. Now, here we are. It's 2021. 2020 was a harsh year economically. Mfuko iliumia. 2021 is here. Watoto wamerudi shule. They have become big, man. I mean, a child grows. 9 months is not a short period of time. So we need to buy uniform. We've bought uniform, we've bought shoes, we've bought books. The truth is, we've had to take loans and we are still taking loans. So the question is, what are the do's and don'ts of taking a loan? What do I need to consider? What are some of the things I should never take a loan for? Those are the kind of things we want to discuss on the Financial Clinic today. And earlier on, I was asking the question, what's the worst reason you have used to get a loan? You convinced yourself you need money for a certain thing, an item, and you took a loan, and now you look back in retrospect and you regret. Janet is saying, me and borrowing and taking loans, we never get along. Ile niko nayo ndio nitatumia, mambo inaishia hapo. I know somebody who took a loan for a wedding. I was saying earlier, that needs a whole show. Maybe one of these days on the Relationship Clinic, we'll talk about taking a loan for your wedding. Oh my goodness, talk about disaster. It was disaster. So that's what we're getting into this morning, and I'm asking you the same question. What's the worst reason you've taken a loan for? You look back, at the moment it seemed like a brilliant idea and you had to get that money, and then you got the money and you look back now and you're thinking, that's the most silly reason one could use to take a loan. What was that reason? Talk to me. 20316 SMS line. WhatsApp number 0786 316 316. We will be talking to a debt management coach, and he will be teaching us the do's and the don'ts when it comes to taking a loan, borrowing money. It is the Financial Clinic. Today we are talking about the do's and the don'ts of borrowing, taking a loan. Before we engage in that, have you had your cup of Gashai? Umekunywa chai leo asubuhi? Kama haujakunywa chai, you need a hot cup of tea. Eden Tea is the finest garden tea, and Eden Tea is reminding us in this season that we are in, let's continue to work together to be able to flatten the COVID-19 curve. 3 simple things we are reminding you every day. Washing your hands with soap and running water. You know, yesterday I was talking to a parent of a special needs child, and they were saying they are so glad this issue of washing hands has now become near kila mtu, because it's very, very important. So let's continue to wash our hands with soap and running water, and then putting on our face masks and putting them on properly, especially when we're out there interacting with other people, and maintaining interpersonal distance. 3 simple things, very important, that go a long way in helping us to flatten the COVID-19 curve. Now, Eden Tea comes to you in several flavors: Eden Green Tea, Eden Lemon Tea, Eden Purple Tea, Eden Ginger Tea, and Eden Premium Tea. Available in leading outlets at affordable prices. Try it out today. You will agree with me. It truly is the finest garden tea. Okay, we are talking about borrowing money, taking loans, worst reasons you've ever used to take a loan. And I have an SMS here from Cyril in Umoja. Cyril says, for me, I really regretted I took a loan to start an online business, which later I realized was a scam right after I had joined it. alijoin na akapeana pesa na ikapotea namna hiyo. This morning I'm so glad to be joined by debt management coach Roy Okonji. Coach Roy, how are you doing? Roy, can you hear me?
I can hear you. You are breaking.
Oh, I was breaking.
Yes. I think now you're okay.
I was in my teenagehood. My voice was breaking. Happy New Year, my friend. Good to see you. Karibu sana.
Happy New Year to you and to our viewers. Thank you for having me once again.
Awesome. I'll begin by asking you a very interesting question. In talking to a good number of my Christian friends, I find that a good number of Christians are so afraid of taking a loan. They don't want to be in debt because they believe being in debt is a curse. So, is borrowing good or bad, or neither? Talk to me.
Well, it's an interesting question indeed. Different people have different standpoints. There are those who don't want to get there because of fear, maybe because of what happened to them in the past, or because of what they have seen happening to people around them. Then, depending also on the doctrines that one subscribes to, I have come to learn that there are also those who strongly believe that borrowing is a curse, and therefore it is something that needs to be avoided at all costs. Nonetheless, the reality that we are living with is that debt is here to stay. Maybe from a Christian perspective, I may try to understand them, because when they are scanning through Deuteronomy and they see that there will be lenders and they will borrow from none. What I've always wondered is, who will they be lending to? But what I must say at this point is that the truth about debt is that every debt carries a burden element. Whether we want to call it good or bad, you will always have something at the back of your mind, a feeling that you are eagerly waiting for the day you clear this current debt. Whether you will take another one or not, everyone feels that they're carrying something. So we cannot run away from that particular fact. And no wonder the Proverbs were wise enough to say that the borrower is always like a slave to the lender. Because of that constant feeling that you're carrying some burden. But from a common sense perspective, we have debt that we can categorize as good and debt that we can categorize as bad. Good debt is that debt that leaves you better off than it found you, mostly in the long run. It is debt you want to look back and say, I am happy I took this. It moved me from here to this other level. Good bad debt is that which leaves you worse off. You look back and you want to regret. You look back and you want to pinch yourself. Why did I have to go that particular route? Good debt adds value to you. Bad debt takes value away from you. Good debt, financially speaking, brings money to your pockets. Bad debt takes money away from you. So in other words, if you were earning 20,000 and you took a debt that is taking away your 5,000 in the name of repayment, but has nothing to bring to the table, either today or even in the near future, then it is not good debt, because it has come to even rob the little that you had. Because the 5K is going, and you don't have any expectation of anything coming from it, and it has not added any value to you.
Wow. So let's talk about common mistakes people make when they're borrowing, because today we live in a society where borrowing is very easy. I was saying just before we went on air, I was on my phone checking my loan limit on some of these platforms. Na nikipiga hiyo hesabu, I can actually have some good amount of money in my account today if I decide to borrow. You know, all the way to my limit in all these platforms. I can be quite a rich man this morning. But with all this accessibility, what are some common mistakes people are making today when taking a loan?
Well, and it's good that you mentioned the ease of access today, because that has become a very big temptation for very many people.
Yes.
You wake up and your phone reminds you that you qualify for this amount, and people get excited every time they see these limits. And very few can resist the temptation. Very few can remind themselves that they actually didn't want to borrow now. But because the phone has reminded them that this is what they qualify, very many people find themselves borrowing to figure out what they will do with the money. And you know, the human mind never fails in figuring out what you need to do with the money.
Yes.
So very many people burn their fingers at the point of deciding to borrow, in the process of borrowing, and even after they have gotten the money. There are very many people who disregard certain factors that need to be taken into consideration every time you intend to take a loan. Maybe I just mentioned some of these factors that we often overlook, and we end up burning our fingers. And the first factor that we must consider is the purpose of our borrowing. Yes, I have said many times that many borrowers, unfortunately, are what I call ability-driven borrowers. They borrow simply because they qualify. You see, the way you've checked your limits, and today you realize that you qualify for all those amounts of money. Then you begin to borrow. You slept not planning to borrow today, but because you have just checked and realized, or because you've received an SMS reminding you that you qualify, then you rush into borrowing. So very many people disregard to do what I call purpose-driven borrowing. So the first thing you need to consider is the purpose for your borrowing. Yes, your mind has conceived the idea to borrow. But then you need to walk that mind through the process of evaluating the purpose for which you intend to borrow. Ask yourself some serious questions. For instance, why exactly do you need to borrow? Then, once you have identified why you need to borrow, ask yourself whether that is a good reason or a bad reason. Now, that is interesting because every borrower believes that the reason that is pushing them into borrowing is a good reason. But having defined good and bad debt the way we have, I am sure now we begin to look at it from a different perspective. So ask yourself, is this reason going to add value to me, or is it going to rob value from me? Ask yourself, must I borrow for this reason? Is it a reason that can wait until I make my money? Or is it an emergency that must be addressed today? Ask yourself, what do I have for this purpose? Have I saved anything towards this purpose? Or do I want to borrow everything for this purpose? In which case, if you have saved something for that particular purpose, then you need to only look at the amount that is the deficit. You need to ask yourself, the reason for which I want to borrow, is it a legal reason? Because if it's an illegal reason, it could also land you in trouble and even make your financial story more complicated.
What do you mean an illegal reason?
You might want to borrow to buy guns. You might want to borrow to peddle drugs. You might want to borrow to do those things. I have seen cases where people find themselves trapped in debt because the initial reason was actually an illegality, and when the law caught up with them, they found themselves in trouble. So part of the evaluation of your purpose for borrowing is to look at the legality of that particular purpose. So if it's a purpose that is going against the law, you want to borrow so that you can bring down a forest, for example. There are many lenders who refuse to lend to charcoal burners, for instance, because their values dictate so, and because perhaps in that particular area it is illegal to do charcoal burning. So when you borrow for such and the law catches up with you, then you'll be in trouble and your financial story might be messed even more. Then under that, you also ask yourself this popular question that I like asking: who do you borrow for? Who are you planning to borrow for? And I like saying that when I say this, people think that I'm asking, once you take the money, who are you going to give the money? That is not the point here. That is quite literal. Well, we have people who have messed themselves for borrowing and giving money to others. But what I imply here is deeper than literally giving the money to another person. I'm trying to ask, where have you drawn the inspiration for the borrowing that you want to do now? Is it an original inspiration? Is it a reason that has emanated from deep within you?
Okay.
Or is it that you are borrowing so that you can look like so-and-so? You are borrowing to compare yourself or borrowing to compete, right? So in that case, I have argued that then you are not borrowing for yourself. You are borrowing for the person you seek to compare yourself with or to compete with. And I like giving this simple example that if you and I work in the same office, and today I see you with a very good phone, but I don't have the money to buy that particular phone.
Yeah.
So if I rush to my app and borrow so that I can buy that phone, that similar phone, so that tomorrow I can be even with you at the office, or I buy a better phone so that I outshine you, then I am borrowing for you and not for myself. Had you not come with that better phone, I wouldn't be borrowing today.
Okay.
Now, if I came to the office with that phone and I discover that you have even bought a more superior one, I'll be frustrated. I'll be disappointed. It is because I was not borrowing for myself. I was doing it for you.
Okay.
Now, that becomes dangerous because when you borrow for other people, you are not doing it for yourself. So it's not original. So you will actually overlook very many other factors because you are trying to catch up. You are trying to avoid being left behind. And that is very dangerous.
Okay.
So that's one factor that we must consider before we go into borrowing. The other factor that I need to mention here is the repayment ability. How able are you to repay the debt that you propose to take?
Okay.
Many formal lenders will take you through a process of qualifiability.
Yeah.
They'll try to gauge your financial position, and they will tell you, we can only lend this amount to you. You can only qualify for this amount. For the people who are salaried, they will ask you for your payslip. They will look at it, make calculations, and tell you, you can qualify for this amount.
Yes.
For people in business, they will look at your financials and your statements, and then they will tell you, we can only lend to you this particular amount. Now, trouble is, sometimes the money you need is bigger than what you can qualify for.
Very true.
And it is high time we begin to respect qualifiability. Because when you are told this is what you qualify for, then they are trying to help you, because if you squeeze yourself beyond that point, then you might begin to encounter trouble. Sometimes, even where you are seated, you might actually realize that you don't qualify even for what they're telling you qualify.
Yeah.
Because maybe you have other debts that are not in the formal space, that are not appearing on your payslip.
Yeah.
So you know very well that if more money is taken from me, I'm going to struggle. But then you go ahead and even borrow, well knowing that you do not qualify. So when you disregard that affordability, when you think that the lender is being unfair to you by suggesting that you can only qualify for amount X, then you try to force to get a bigger amount. I have met people who try to force.
Yes.
For example, people in business will try to say that they have other sources of income to prove that they can qualify for a bigger amount, when they well know that the amount they can qualify is what the lender has said. They do not have any other source of income. So it is important that we obey, we respect the fact that what we qualify for is what we can repay comfortably, without injuring other aspects of our financial lives.
Great.
So it's important that we consider that, failure to which we are making a serious blunder.
Wow. This morning we are talking about the do's and don'ts of borrowing, because borrowing, people will borrow. But how do you borrow wisely? If you have any questions for us today, 20316 is the SMS line, and the WhatsApp number is 0786 316 316. Several people sharing their borrowing experiences. I'll be reading some of these SMSs in the next short while. It is the Financial Clinic, do's and don'ts of borrowing. We are hanging out with debt management coach Roy Okonji. Responses coming in. This one is from Otieno. Otieno says, good morning, Pastor Jimo. In our marriage, I took a bank loan to refurbish an old car. Water disaster. The car was unfixable. I got conned of all the cash by a crooked mechanic. Collectors ndio hao mlangoni. Cat and mouse ikaanza for 6 months. Got my Meko, my microwave, fridge and furniture repossessed. Tulihurumiwa tu kitanda because of the child, and my wife was also pregnant. I learnt my painful lesson, and since then, me and loans are oil and water. That's a good lesson right there. I have another message here that says, good morning, James. Loans should only be taken for development, not for luxury. Plan before you take a loan. A loan without a plan will go to waste, and repayment will be a headache. A loan should repay itself. Thank you so much. Keep sharing your experiences and also your questions. 20316 SMS, WhatsApp 0786 316 316. Roy, back to you. I'm just wondering, in a season like we are in now, you know, looking at how last year was a harsh year. Alafu sasa this year ndio hii watoto wamerudi shule, they have grown, we have to buy uniform, we have to pay school fees. You know, if you have to borrow in a season like this, what are some key things you need to consider and to think about?
Yeah, thank you so much. It is true that a season like this has actually made it necessary for some people to borrow. Even those that would have wished not to borrow, but because of how last year looked on them, sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you need to borrow.
Yeah.
So what we are discussing this morning is what would put us to a position where we avoid burning fingers, even as we interact with debt.
Yes.
So the other thing that needs to be considered is the cost of borrowing.
What do you mean by that?
Debt is not free money. Debt comes at a price.
Sio mshahara.
And a lot of times when people want to borrow, their mind is fixed on the amount they are looking for.
Yeah.
And very few people will take a moment to reflect on what it will cost them to have that amount. What is the price for that particular amount? People just push for the money they want. And that is how many people have also burnt their fingers, because many of them end up taking money from very dangerous sources, very costly sources. Yes, and I think I've mentioned before that in this town we have people who give money at 100% per week.
What?
And those places are full of people.
100% per week?
Per week, yes, per week. I don't want to put it per annum, but that is
wow.
for us to reflect on. But you can imagine what takes you to that place is because at that time you are blind to any other reality. What you seek is the money you need to solve your issue.
Yeah.
So if you are taking 10 Gs today, next week Wednesday, you will need to give them back 20 Gs. So next week Wednesday is when many people begin to realize, kumbe it wasn't 10 Gs now, it is 20. Because they failed to consider the cost of the borrowing. As much as is possible, if you must borrow, then go for the cheapest source. I like saying that cheap is expensive except debt. Yeah, it is only cheap debt that is not expensive, but every other cheap thing might be expensive. So now, cost of borrowing.
Back to that, there's something you've said there. I'm just thinking.
Yes.
Is it that many of us gravitate towards the quickest source and not the cheapest source? Because it's all about accessibility and how fast I can get the money. We never even stop to consider how much will I need to repay. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And that's why many lenders know that weakness and they come promising convenience. The reason why mobile debts, for instance, are selling fast is because they are promising you convenience. They're promising you speed.
Yeah.
And that convenience is the one that comes hiding the cost element. So very many people do not look at the cost element. On the day of repayment is when you begin to see people asking questions. Only how much does your loan cost?
Yeah.
So it is important before you get into any debt, scout around and check at the cost and then pick the cheapest. But let me say, for those that will be borrowing from the formal space, some years back, the government made it better for borrowers and said that every lender will need to attach something called the total cost of credit, the TCC, on the application documentation, so that every borrower can see from the beginning what the debt will look like throughout the process.
Okay.
Now, sadly, many of us, again, do not have time to look at the TCC document. We are quick to append signatures, and that's why many lenders give you the forms with the excess marked at where you need to put the signature. So many of us are quick to ask, ni sign wapi, and we sign. Then later on, we begin to complain that this thing is not ending. This thing is not moving the way you thought it would move. You thought the rate was 14 and you have just realized you are paying at 20. It's because you didn't stop to look at the TCC document. Now, total cost of credit has three main components. The first component is the interest rate.
Yeah.
This is the most common component. So the few people who try to be financially educated,
yes,
will try to find out what the interest rate is. Now, people got confused when the rates got capped, because at that particular point, people assumed that that every bank was having the same cost.
Yeah.
People assumed that because it was 14% across the board, so the cost was the same. So you could now just walk into Bank A without the need to compare the banks. That is far from the truth. Because the other component of the total cost of credit is bank charges. Now, this is where many lenders hid their source of revenue.
Yes.
Because if the rates have been capped at 14, then we have these other items called negotiation fee, processing fee, and things like those ones. So there is no way a loan at 14% and negotiation fee of 1% will look like a loan at 14% and negotiation fee of 5%.
Yes.
So people who rush to look at interest rate were still shocked at the end of the day, because their friends who borrowed from another bank will tell them, my cost is this. And when they look at their cost, but they say the rate was the same.
Yes.
Where is the difference? It's because we also fail to consider the bank charges element. But the good thing about the TCC document, it has all those components well articulated. Now, the third component there is third-party costs.
Okay.
Sometimes you are taking a loan that needs the intervention of third parties.
Yeah.
For example, you might, especially for business loans, maybe you need to insure your stock, so there is insurance cost, or your loan needs to be insured.
Yes.
There is insurance cost, there is valuation cost, there is legal fees if lawyers will be involved in the process, and many such costs. Back in the day, while still at the bank, I remember someone who came to borrow 50,000, and the cost of credit exceeded the credit they were looking for, because they didn't stop to look at what it entailed to get that amount of money. Because they were borrowing for a secured loan that was to be secured by a piece of land. So when you look at the valuation cost, then you look at the legal fees to even register the legal charge.
Yes.
The encumbrance to show that the bank has interest in the land. Then you look at all those other charges, then the bank fees, and then the interest rate. Before we even look at the interest rate, the guy had already used up the 50,000 he was planning to borrow.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, so it's important that we consider the cost of borrowing, and we know that the more we borrow expensively, the more we weaken our financial muscle, because that is money you are giving away. There is no reason you borrow at 30% when there is another lender who can give you at 10% the same thing under the same conditions.
Yeah.
So it's important that we consider that. Then another thing that we fail to consider, or that we need to consider, is the impact of the proposed borrowing on your budget, on your economy as a person.
Yes.
Because everyone is running their economies. You are receiving money and you're spending money. Now, because our eyes are focused on the amount we are looking for, very few people fail to look. Very few people look at the impact, where that loan will leave them once deductions are loaded. Let me give you an example. If you have been earning 50,000 shillings,
yes,
and you have been spending this money coin to coin, maybe you've not even been saving. So the money has just been enough to sustain you from end month to end month.
Yeah.
So today you've realized that you qualify for a loan that can be repaid at 10,000 per month. So you have taken the loan, and maybe the loan is not bringing value. Maybe you are furnishing your house or doing something else.
Yes.
Or maybe for a reason that may look very good, like paying school fees for your children. But you fail to look at the impact of that debt. So this is what begins to happen. At the end of the month, when the 10,000 is deducted, your budget remains with 40,000.
Yeah.
You have been used to 50. That is what has been running you.
Yes.
So when deductions are loaded, that is when you discover, the landlord's money is short by 10K. Or you have paid everything, you forgot shopping. Because the things that you have been doing need to be done. Now, chances are high at that time you have now exhausted your borrowing limit from the formal space. But now you have a landlord looking at you because you have a deficit of 10,000 that needs to be sorted.
Yes.
That is when people begin to find themselves at the Shylock's door because they need to sort out the landlord. So what you're beginning to do is you will go and borrow that 10,000 from an expensive source. Let's say they give you at 20%. So you will repay with 2,000 on top. So that's 12,000. So the next month, after deduction of the loan for 10,000, you remain with your 40,000. Then you pay the Shylock 12,000. You are left with 28. Remember, your budget is still 50.
Yes.
And the fairest thing any budget has done is to go up. So you will now need to borrow 22 for you to survive.
Yes.
So you go and borrow 22. Now at 20%, that is a big amount. I highly doubt you will even borrow 22 because the average mind does not borrow money like 2,000. So you will borrow 25.
Yeah.
or 30. There is a thought behind you that you need to remain with something in the pocket. So instead of 22, why can't I just take 25? In fact, some informal lenders decide that they will be lending money in bundles of 5 or bundles of 10. So when you go for 22, they tell you we can only give you 25 or 20. So how do you take 20 and you need 22? So you take 25. So that's how you keep weakening your system.
Yeah.
Month in, month out. So by the 6th month, chances are high that the income you get is nothing. So you have to borrow entirely for you to run yourself.
Very true.
So if you continue that way, then you find yourself in a very difficult situation.
Very true.
Where your income perhaps is only enough to pay interest, and then so you have to keep borrowing for you to sustain yourself. So it's important to consider the impact. Now, when you ask yourself about the impact, you are simply asking yourself whether indeed you need to borrow now, if it's true that you do not have space in your budget. So if you must borrow, first of all, ask yourself, what am I going to shake in my budget? What am I going to pause in my budget so that I can accommodate these deductions?
Because life can't continue the way it was because...
No. It cannot, because you're bringing a disruption. So you must ask yourself, am I going to stop this or am I going to reduce this so that I can accommodate the debt? Alternatively, if that cannot happen, then you are asking yourself, can I wait until maybe I have a pay rise? When we get our salary increment, then I can use the increased portion to finance the borrowing that I need to do.
Yeah.
So you don't force things. You don't say, I need this thing now and now, when you realize that your budget does not have that particular space. So it's important that people begin to ask themselves, the impact of the proposed debt, because that's a serious thing, and it has burned many people's hands in a very big way.
Okay. Shortly, we'll talk about are there alternatives to borrowing? Because we are so quick to borrow because the money is easily accessible, especially in this mobile technology age. But before I think of borrowing, are there other possibilities that I could look at that many people fail to look at. We'll talk about that in the next short while. I'm giving you an opportunity to ask questions today. We only have about 17 more minutes. So if you have a question for Roy, 20316 is the SMS line, and the WhatsApp number is 0786 316 316. It is the Financial Clinic. Today we are talking about the do's and the don'ts of borrowing. In studio with us via Zoom, we have a debt management coach. Coach Roy Okonji is helping us to gain a deeper understanding and to know when to borrow and where to borrow from and how to borrow and the things not to borrow for. So I was asking earlier, Roy, are there alternatives to borrowing? You know, we are so quick to run towards borrowing, especially from the mobile lending apps, because they're easily accessible. I mean, I can dial a few digits here and soon enough I'll have 50,000 bob in my account, just like that. But are there alternatives? Is there a different way we can look at this scenario?
Well, that's a good question. Are there alternatives? Yes, there are alternatives. Mm-hmm. The reason why we tend to gravitate towards debt quite a lot is because it for many people it looks like an easier option. Uh-huh. Because the alternative is the procedural way. Maybe before I come to the alternative, let me just mention one last thing about, I've just realized I didn't mention something very important.
Okay.
About the things that we overlook. There are so many. I have captured them in my book, Debt is Good Only If You Master It. Uh-huh. The second chapter is called Before You Borrow. So people can interact with the book and get to know the details of all the things you need to consider before borrowing. But let me just mention the turnaround time. The time it will take from the time you apply for the credit to the time you receive the funds is very important to consider. So you ask your lender, how long will it take you to avail the money to me? So that then you can compare that time with the nature of your need. Uh-huh. Because sometimes people borrow money and they get the money when it is overtaken by events.
Yes.
If you had an emergency today, it is very hilarious that you start processing a loan that is secured by title deed. Chances are high that you will get the money when your person is normal if they were sick and you wanted to treat them. So you must consider the turnaround time. It is still hilarious if you are borrowing to buy a packet of unga and you start processing a bank loan using your payslip that will take 4 days. I don't know whether your family will still be waiting for the 4 days before they can have a meal.
Okay.
So it's important to consider that. Now, your question will be answered in the next few things I want to mention about how to avoid irresponsible borrowing, how to make things a bit better for yourself. And the first thing I want to mention, which is a direct answer to your question, is that you need to manage your money well. Mm-hmm. That begins to show you the alternative to borrowing, because if you manage your money well, then you are able to reduce chances of what I call man-made emergencies, where situations occur and you realize that you didn't plan for them, you don't have the money for them, you spend all your money without necessarily thinking about what was going to happen. Sometimes you knew it would happen, but because you don't sit to plan your money, then it becomes an emergency when that time comes.
Okay.
So it is good to know and command where your money goes. And that is the biggest question in the conversation of money. It's not about how to make money, but where does your money go? And this is the question I want to pose to our viewers and listeners. Where does your money go? Go think about it and just establish. You need to be in control of where your money goes. That means that before your money comes, sit down and say, this is how I want to use my money. And then in that way, then you will create an alternative to borrowing, because there are some things that you will be able to do that if you are reckless, you would have been forced to borrow to do them. The second thing is that you need to have an emergency kitty.
Ooh.
I am happy a time like this that you and I will not need to make a lot of noise about emergency kitties.
Oh, yes.
COVID made it very clear. It came to practically demonstrate this particular message, because we have actually even realized that even the 6 months minimum worth of salary that we keep talking about is even little, because COVID has been able to overstretch people.
Yeah.
Even those that had tried to save and create an emergency kitty, many of them found themselves draining that particular kitty to the bottom. So it is important, and I'm happy that I keep meeting people who now say, I do not need anyone to remind me.
Yes.
Next time I start getting money, I must ensure that I'm not spending the whole of it, that I'm setting aside some of it for a rainy day, because it is now clear that rainy days do happen. So have yourself an emergency kitty that you need to safeguard so much, because this is what you can call your money.
Yeah.
The money you earn is yours by name, but is not entirely yours, because as long as the landlord, the bills are still claiming it, it ceases to be yours. You don't have control over it. But the money you set aside is the money you can call your own. Is the money you can wake up and say, I want to use this money to do this, and nobody will question.
Yes.
So you need to begin retaining money, saving a portion of every money that comes your way. The third thing I need to mention is that we need to, as much as possible, avoid borrowing for consumption. When we embrace borrowing for consumption, borrowing to buy food, borrowing to buy fuel, borrowing for bus fare, borrowing for things that are recurrent, things that we ought to have planned ourselves in advance for, then we are beginning to eat our tomorrow today. And the biggest question remains that what will we do when that tomorrow comes? Because tomorrow does come.
Yeah.
I think many times we overstretch the YOLO mentality, and that's why I keep asking people today, why are you still here today? If yesterday you said you only live once.
Yeah.
You should have ended living yesterday.
Yes.
So the truth is that tomorrow does come, and many times we look back and say, I wish I started doing the right thing at that time, because we never figured out tomorrow would come. So let's avoid borrowing for consumption, borrowing for things that are not adding value, for things that are just draining our money. Then I need to mention that you also need to be true to yourself. Be your own person. Be original. Run your own race on your own lane. Avoid comparing yourself with other people.
Yes.
Avoid competing with others. You know, we struggle competing with people whose stories we know nothing about. We want to buy cars because we have seen people with cars. We want to buy phones because we have seen people with phones. We don't know their story. Maybe they didn't borrow to buy those things.
Yes.
But as we are borrowing because we want to be seen, to also be present. So we have to learn to be our own persons, because when the rain starts beating you, the person you are competing and comparing yourself with is not there to share with you in the agony.
Yes.
So we have to realize that financial journeys are personal journeys, and then therefore we have to be true to ourselves. We have to stop feeling ashamed because you are the only person who is not driving in the clique of friends you have. You are the only person who does not have a modern phone and things like those. Let us be true to our own journeys, because at the end of the day, then it is the decisions that you make today that will either propel you to prosperity or hound you out of prosperity.
Okay.
And then the last thing I want to mention is that we need to start thinking about making an extra coin. The dependence on one stream of income has also been proven by COVID that it is a disaster.
Yeah.
It is not dependable. However big the salary or the income from that source is, it has been demonstrated now to us through the people we know or directly to us that reliance on one source of income is dangerous.
Yes.
So it is high time we begin asking ourselves, what else can we do to make an extra shilling? The truth is that each one of us can do something to make an extra shilling. Yeah. Every one of us, regardless of where we are, the pressure that surrounds what we do on a daily basis, we all have something we can do. Ask yourself whether you have a skill you can monetize. Ask yourself whether the services that you offer 8 to 5 can also be offered to another person past 5 for 1 hour or 2 hours at an extra coin. The beauty of an extra coin, as far as debt is concerned, is twofold. Number one is that it helps you minimize the chances of going deeper into the mess of the trap of debt. Because the things you would have borrowed for, now you have some coin that you can use to buy them in cash. And secondly, it speeds up the process of coming out from the trap of debt.
Yes.
So if you're creating an extra coin and you're able to manage it properly, you realize you have some extra shilling you can use to clear your mshwari here, your other loan here and there. So if you continue embracing that particular idea, then you realize within a short time, you are actually out of the woods. So that is the power of thinking about an extra coin. So it's high time we entertain the thought around what else we can do to make an extra coin.
Wow, Roy, thank you so much for talking to us today. Unfortunately, our time is up, but we'll pick up this conversation again because we also need to talk to those who are stuck. There are those who are stuck in that realm of debt, and they wonder how they can get out. You're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and then you go to Jane to be able to pay Janet. So we will definitely have to come back to this conversation and address that whole issue. But for today, thank you so much. Unfortunately, I'm out of time. I hope that the conversation today has given you some pointers. If you must borrow, then borrow wisely.
This and more of our shows, log on to www.familymediaonline.com to enjoy a wide variety of programs, from current affairs to testimonials and features, pastoral and inspirational shows, kids entertainment, and so much more. Also stream live on www.familymedia.tv.